This looked different, like a man ready for his life to begin. "You really think so?" He was jangling his hands in his pockets, and she could see him itching to move. Don hated standing still. He had danced before he'd walked, according to his mother. Now, freshly graduated from high school and all of 18 years old, he was about to do what he'd talked about since he was a kid. Get on a train to New York and chase his dreams of becoming the world's most renowned dancer, the toast of Broadway. Broadway won't know what's hit it. He smiled brightly and pulled her into a hug. "I'll miss you, though." She pressed her face into his overcoat and sniffed, searching for the faintly familiar smell of brine and fish that had lingered on him these last 4 years of high school, as he'd spent every summer and weekend working on her father's fishing boat. But it was gone. Now he smelled like something else, like allspice and a hint of soap. This was it, the moment she should tell him. It was now or never, because things were already changing. He was already not the Don she'd known. "Don, The whistle of his train blew, and he let go of her, kneeling to pick up his time-worn suitcase. He'd spent every cent he had on this ticket. Arlene had given him her old suitcase for the journey because he couldn't afford to buy one. Goodness knows his parents would have laughed in his face if he'd asked them. Not that he would have. He was much too proud for that. "No, you can't go yet. I have to tell you," she started, the words getting stuck in her throat. He put a newsboy cap on his head, the one she'd given him for Christmas last year, and turned back to face her. "Tell me what?" Her eyes pooled with tears, and she swiped at them frantically. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. "Oh, Lena, don't cry. Please, I can bear anything but your tears." She shoved her hands in the pockets of her wool coat and was searching desperately for a handkerchief when her fingers brushed against cold metal. It was a penny. She pulled it out and pressed it into the palm of his hand, curling his fingers over it and leaning down to brush a kiss to his knuckles. She straightened, and he gave her a funny look. "What was that for?" "For luck," she mumbled, her voice watery with her tears. He reached into his pocket and fished out a handkerchief, dabbing at her eyes for her. The whistle blew again, and the conductor started walking up and down the platform, calling out, "All aboard!" Don kissed her on the cheek, muttered, "That's for luck, too," and turned to step onto the train. He disappeared for a moment, and then the window nearest her slid down, and he leaned out. She dabbed at her eyes and gave him a helpless wave, so he made a funny face in return, pulling out his ears and sticking out his tongue. She giggled in spite of herself, and the train began to move. She walked alongside it as it began its inexorable crawl out of the station. Should she tell him now? "Don, that penny wasn't just for luck." He had his head out the window, and the sight of it made her laugh. "What?" he asked. "You look like Merlin." He gave her a look of mock horror. "You think I look like your family dog?" She shrugged and smiled at him again. "You must admit there's a strong resemblance." She started to jog now to keep pace with the train. "What else was the penny for, then?" She was almost at the end of the platform now. Soon he'd be gone. "It was for—" She stumbled, her foot catching on the hem of her skirt. She looked up in horror as the train raced farther away from her. He turned and whooped, raising his hat and waving it in the air as he looked back at her. "Next stop, 42nd Street, he bellowed, blowing her a kiss, and then pulling himself back inside and shutting the window as the train pulled farther away. "For love," she whispered, placing her hands back in her pockets and finding his handkerchief there. She pulled it from the pocket and waved it absent-mindedly after the train. But she knew he wasn't looking back. Not when all of his dreams lay ahead of him.